wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good afternoon and hello everyone. First of all, we would like to say thank you on behalf of our existence in this meeting today. And Heylaw is proudly to present their webinar in collaboration with campus partners throughout Indonesia called Talking Seriously Constitutional Populism. My name is Sakarmentari Hendrajano, batch of 2019 from the Faculty of Law, Universitas 11 Maret, will be your moderator for today. We would like to also remind that this webinar event is currently streaming live on YouTube, and today's webinar will be held by Prof. Adam Czarnota, co-director of the Network for Interdisciplinary Studies from the University of New South Wales. And before we proceed, firstly, we would like to give the time and place to Dr. Awaluddin Marwan, SHMH, to give a glimpse of his opening remarks. Dr. Awaluddin, the time and place is yours.
Thank you, moderators, Sakarmentari. Thank you very much, Professor Adam. I have great memory with Professor Adam in Onyati because he was my lectures, and then we continue having communication through email, and then I read his articles and very inspiring, and now we continue to learn his new concepts, and I think it's very important for around the world, including Indonesia, about constitutional populisms, because we now have a sort of political movement and political fractions between various groups, and we still believe that the rule of law and human rights as the main important idea in our constitutions, no matter the political background. So would like to thanks again, and cannot wait to hear the Professor Adam lecture. Thank you for participants, and I give back to moderators.
Thank you very much, Dr. Awaluddin, for your opening remark. And before getting to the core of the event, allow me to introduce what Heylaw is first. Heylaw Indonesia is a platform that contains legal consultation while it will bring clients with legal experts together by online in Indonesia. In addition, Heylaw also has several services such as legal consultation, Heylaw Edu, which is an online learning platform provided by Heylaw, and also Indonesian Dutch legal dictionaries. To get the features provided by Heylaw Indonesia, you can always download our apps on Play Store or App Store. So now, I'm very pleased to welcome Prof. Adam for our special event today. He's an associate professor at the University of New South Wales in Sydney and is the co-director of the Network for Interdisciplinary Studies of Law and co-chief investigator of the research group called Constitutional Populism, Friend or Foe of Constitutional Democracy. Prof. Adam has detailed knowledge of Central European societies and their history, and lived experiences in turbulent times with scholarly endeavors in social legal studies during his collaboration at the Faculty of Law at the University of Warsaw in Poland and the International Institute for the Sociology of Law in Oñati, Spain. His areas and expertise include law and social theory, legal theory, European Union law, and European human rights law and institutions. His current research focuses on what is happening on the ground and the new populist regimes with a balanced perspective on these developments by casting time in both their positive and negative dimensions. So hello, Prof. Adam, how are you doing?
Good. Thank you very much for this. I'm fine, right? Shall I start?
Yes, we would like to present you that the time and place is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for introduction and for invitation, actually, because it's an honor to speak to you. Look, what I am going to tell is sort of the work in progress, as was mentioned before by the moderator, with two colleagues, with Martin Kriegen and Wojciech Sadurski of Sydney University, and Martin from my university, University of New South Wales, work on this constitutional populism project. And it's not finished yet, but that's my my part. My main interest in this area is, geographically speaking, Central Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe. As you could see, I am not a native speaker, so the English, as for you, is my second language, and I'm not a Shakespeare, right, in this language as well. So if my pronunciation will be not understandable, please let me know, and I will try to repeat several times, right? Okay, and let's maybe go to this project. It means why constitutional populism? Populism is not something new. It means populism existed basically from the 19th century, right? Or even earlier. The beginning of this concept of populism were narodniks in Russia, somewhere in the 19th century. Let's say during the big crisis in America, there were also populist movements. But what is different now is that populism is a global movement as such, you could say, or global phenomenon rather, not movement, with plenty of different phases. It's not a one movement, but very complex phenomenon. And plenty of different social scholars, they try to identify what is the structure, what are the causes, what are the effects of this populist phenomenon nowadays in 21st century. From my perspective, or from my perspective, what is the difference is that the contemporary 21st century populist movement started to treat law seriously, which means, and especially constitutional law, that before, it means this movement tried to was characterized by the legal nihilism. When the 21st century, especially in Central Eastern Europe, it means this movement is focused on the clever use of law as such. So therefore, the question which is asked by myself are how to explain the sources of the populism in Central Eastern Europe, and then the second, what is the relation between this populist phenomenon here and the constitutionalism as such? What is the impact on constitutionalism, and can we identify something like populist constitutionalism? And then I will try to address this issue. So it means I don't know how much are you familiar with the history of Central Eastern Europe, but you know, for the long time, it means since 1945, it was within the communist world. It means Soviet Union was dominant here, and in 89, 90, this process of decommunization, when the communists collapsed. The first wave after the collapse of communism was characterized by the rapid transformation, right? The quick social, political, and also, or let's say differently, political, then institutional and social change. I mean, that's not surprising that was a sort of a rapid revolution. Why a rapid revolution? Because what was necessary was to change the institution, and the change of the institution was based on what? On the political will. Then the second, not only political institution, but also the change of economy, which means the movement from the communist economy to the capitalism as such. And you know, in the majority of these countries, the private property did not exist, right? It means private property of land or the means of production, using the Marxist language. But after 1989, that was a rapid transformation of these societies. Now the question is on what was the model of this transformation? Surprisingly, the dominant ideological attitude at the time was the attitude that don't make any type of experiments, but simply copy the institutions. It means economical, social, maybe not, but economical and political institutions from the West. And with a quite harsh result on the society. It means for the long time, almost for 20 years, population was rather silent. It means that decisions were taken by the political elites, and there was not much political life on the bottom of society. And at the same time, there were the rapid and quite drastic economical reforms, which means that all those state assets were sold out, and there was a creation of the capitalist economy with sort of the process of the process in which the society became extremely poor as such, right? Now, 20 years later, 30 years later, situation is totally different. It means almost all of those countries, except the former republic of the Soviet Union, such as Belarus, Ukraine, they are member of the European Union. It means that majority of majority of them joined the European Union in 2004. But the joining of European Union was connected with what? With acceptance of so-called Copenhagen criteria, which means that what are the criteria such that the country has to have market economy, rule of law, and democracy. Now only is the question, what does it mean, rule of law? What does it mean, democracy? It means is difference between the making declaration through the amendments to the constitution that from this day on, this country is governed by law, which is Rechtsstaat concept, right? And to make really rule of law workable in the country. And then there was plenty of other issues, such that the judiciary in the majority of these countries were compromised. It means I can't say that each judge was politically and morally compromised, but majority probably of them were, right? It means judiciary did not, during the communists, did not play the important role. So the first movement actually was amendments to the constitutions, or later on creation of the new constitutions. And the Polish constitution was adopted, new constitution was adopted in 1997. And the Polish constitution is based on the liberal way, based on the division of power, right? Principle of rule of law, and recognition of private property. But at the same time, there is plenty of stipulation in the constitutions which recognize the egalitarian attitudes. It means imposing on the state some obligation to conduct social policies which are just, which of course during the transformation was not possible to introduce. Now situation changed basically in the 21st century. Why? On the one hand, the standard of living for the citizens improved, but with the cost. It means the cost was such that if you look at the migration from the country to the other richer countries of European Union, that was huge. From Poland, more than 1 million people, especially young people in the early 20s, well educated, they migrated to the Netherlands or to Britain, to Sweden, to Norway, to find a job. Where here it means that was who was left, basically the people who is with middle age or older. But it means what happens probably, it's not probably, what happened in the 21st century was the creation of the political movements which were called by the other political parties as populist movements, right? So the question for us, it seems to me, is what is populism as such? How to understand populism? And then I will try to also go to show this, how to understand constitutionalism, in what way to understand constitutionalism. So let's start briefly with populism. It's not my intention, actually, to create any definition of populism. As I mentioned before, populism is a very complex phenomenon. One of my friend and collaborator coined this expression that is a chameleon-like phenomenon. It means that what is populism in particular countries, it means depends on the context, right? It means, and political slogans, political programs and activities are sort of the dependent on the context in which this phenomenon is being created, right? Generally speaking, there is an agreement in the literature that we could distinguish three different types of meaning of populism. The first of all is a populism as a political movement. So it means with some of the program, like for instance, the National Front in France, right? And what is there? It means they stress basically that sovereign, the people, the power should be returned to the people. But there's of course immediately is a question: who are those people? Everybody, all citizens? No, only the true citizens, right? It means that's why German-American scholar Jan Werner Miller claimed basically that populism is based on the moral superiority of the people. But they decide who are the true people, who are the members of this true sovereign. So it's the first, as a political movement. Then the second is a style. It means populism understood as a style in politics. So I mean, it's basically, if you look in the literature, right, there is a division between left populist, right populist, but if you look at any political party, especially in the election process, there's a plenty of promises which are only partly fulfilled later on. And the majority of them use the populist language, slogans, to simply get bigger electorate and win the election. So we could say that Macron in France, in his speeches, used also the populist style, right? Populist propaganda in order to mobilize his own supporters. And then so making on the conclusion that we could claim that majority actually of leaders and political parties, they use this style, rhetoric. Probably there is, in the mass society, there is no other possibility. But the third one, it means the third one of the meaning of populism is as a thin ideology. It means which is connected with the first one, but not necessarily. As a thin, not thick, but thin ideology. And I partly mentioned already the most important element. It means the element that a populism as ideology is basically focused on what? On the representation of the true citizen, through people, through sovereign. They are characteristics. And now in 21st century, I totally agree with that. There's a very good book which was published quite recently by Nadia Urbinati, the Italian-American scholar from University of New York, now, if I remember correctly, and under the title, I, the People, when what she claimed there in this book is that there is a peculiar relationship between the liberal constitutional democracy and populism. So it means this peculiar relation is such that on the one hand, the contemporary populist movement is an outcome of shortcomings in operation of the liberal constitutional democracies. On the other hand, so it's based on the criticism of the institutions of liberal constitutional democracy, and on the other hand, is totally dependent on that institutions of a liberal constitutional democracy. What are those institutions? The first of all, division of power, right? It means, and liberties, is political liberties, which are playing the most important role. And Urbinati, in her book, it means what she stressed is that sort of the double layers. On the one layer is a is a layer of the public space, you could say, when there's an expression of opinion necessary for the populace to receive the momentum as such. Then the second layer is a layer of the operation of populism. It means operating when they took power. And now what interests us and me as well is this populace in power. It means what is a situation, not a sort of the political program only, but when the populace took power, when they won, what is their attitude, what they do to the constitutions and constitutionalism, which leads me to the second sort of the element, and actually third, because the first was introduction to the region, then the second populism, and the third one is constitutionalism. Now, how to understand this concept of constitutionalism, right? And it seems to me that the most important, that we could distinguish three different meanings of constitutionalism. Well, the first is that constitutionalism as a legal principle of superiority of constitutional law in the legal system. It means it is internal superiority of constitution as a peculiar type of statute over the other type of statute. The most important element of such understanding of constitutionalism is conviction that the constitution is not only political, but legal act, more legal than not only political, but legal act. Constitution is a source of rights and duties for citizens. Such understanding of constitutionalism is sometimes called legal constitutionalism. It means why I want to stress that. Why? Because it is constitution, perception of the constitution is a sort of the separated from the political life almost and from the society. And the guardians of the constitutions became judges, especially the judges of the constitutional courts or the constitutional tribunals. It means in their hands is an interpretation of the constitutions and the making decision in the constitutional review. It means, is this act compatible with constitution or not at all? And I only want to say, before now that in the Central Eastern Europe, this legal constitutionalism after 1890 became a dominant. It means that constitutional constitutionalism was taken out from the hand of citizens and basically put to the hands of lawyers, and especially judges, which created plenty of problems. I hope I will have a time to speak about. Then the second meaning of the understanding of the constitutionalism is as ideology, and this understanding stress functions of a constitution as normative and institutional safeguarding against arbitrary use of power and against tyranny. You could say that this meaning of the constitutionalism is very close to the concept of rule of law, right? It means what is sort of the restraint imposed on the arbitrary use of power. Such understanding is going further than legal understanding and is mainly focused on the legal organization of power in the state. Right? And constitutional institutions provide legal limits to use of power. Constitutionalists in such understanding require meeting of some criteria in order to be called constitutionalism. And there are plenty of different variants of such understanding of constitutionalism. The most dominant one is a liberal misunderstanding with stress of a guarantee on individual rights. But there is also a different one, which was usually overlooked totally. It means it's a Republican concept of constitutionalism, which also stress the division of power rights, but in the much more with the stress on the participation of citizens in the political taking process, right? So it means the popular is closer to the popular sovereignty, popular constitutionalism, and but all of them, all those subtypes of constitutionalism, they share something in common. And what they share is a limitation, institutional limitations imposed on the political power. But there is a third also understanding of constitutionalism as a political and legal theory, right? An effect of the systematic investigation and which the main object of reflection in this meaning of constitutionalism are the function of the constitutions and the best institutional way to achieve, it means the aim stated before the constitutions. And they also look at the historical sources, historical, social, and cultural context of the operation of constitutionalism. Now, populism, surprisingly, has an impact on all three understandings of constitutionalism. And as I mentioned before, it means that contemporary modern populism of 21st century in Central Eastern Europe is in the permanent dialogue and polemic with all those three understandings of the constitutionalism. And what is this dialogue actually? It looks like that we could analyze that as a relationship between the legal constitutionalism and the political constitutionalism, right? Which means legal constitutionalism, as I mentioned before, is sort of the meaning when the constitution is basically in the hands of the guardians of the constitutions and is separated from the sovereign. Now the political constitutionalists are all those political institutions in the country, and the stress that the sovereign actually must possess, the power basically to decide about the meaning of these institutions, not a law, not lawyers, but that more, let's say, in hands of the representatives of the people, which means usually the parliament. So in the region, what the populists in power, especially in Hungary and in Poland do, it means they criticize the liberal constitutional democracy because they identify, let's say, that liberal constitutional democracy from their point of view equals this legal type of constitutionalism. And I'll only say you there are two different ways of dealing with liberal constitutions in Hungary and in Poland. That in Hungary, because of the constitutional majority in parliament won by the Orban Fidesz party, they changed the constitution. And Orban declared that, well, what is necessary is to build an illiberal state, illiberal, and that he called that not anti-liberal, but simply non-liberal, something different, new type, right? And in Poland, when the ruling party, which is called Law and Justice, right, party, didn't win the majority, constitutional majority. Therefore, their attitudes to constitution is something different. They try to simply modify, right, through the statutes, the operation of the constitutional institution, which again is criticized by the opposition as unconstitutional. So what are the main issues actually taken by the populists if we try to explain their attitudes to the constitution? And I identified three issues, it seems to me. One is democracy, right? It means democracy understand as overcoming of formal institutional obstacles of liberal constitutional democracy. And the second issue, which is at stake here, is connected with identity. And the third is of equality and justice, which means usually reduced to the economical exclusion of part of citizens from the political decision-making process. So what I try to say is basically that legal constitutionalism, liberal constitutionalism, was to high degree the source of a populist movement in the region. It means that populist movement is being created by the situation when there was a too rigid, too legalistic attitudes to the constitution. It means not the constitutionalists, but to the constitution itself, right? And they try to change. The first attack, it means in both countries, went towards what? Towards the constitutional courts. Why? Because they were the true guardian of the constitution, right? And they claim they possess enormous power, really. It means they simply, each constitutional court basically is performing the political function. It's sometimes called so-called negative legislator, right? But it was not only negative, actually, that interpretation made by the judges in this tribunal constitutional courts, the outcome of this interpretation were adoption of some policies, and which means, well, these judges are not elected. It means their legitimacy is rather weak, right? They are nominated for, let's say, 10 years in office, and that's it. And they are not politically accountable at all. So the first attack went towards this judiciary of the court. Then the second to the what they called judicial caste, right? Casta, caste, means that profession, basically, that all judges in the country are sort of the professional community which became obstacle for the realization of the true democracy. But it's not everything, because we could ask the question, is there anything new what they brought? And at the moment, it looks like that no. It means they changed that the attack went on the personal control of those institutions. But I hope at least that will be creation in reality, some type of the new constitutionalism. What is the most important is the problem of the not changing of electoral law, because there was a rather minor changes in Poland, bigger in Hungary, but rather the change in the interpretation of the sovereign, right? To give the bigger, power somehow, or the bigger power to the representation. It means to the parliaments. And now is a problem. Why is a problem? Because representative democracy is also criticized, that the representatives of the sovereign, they realize their own interests quite often, or the interests of the political parties, but not interests of the true sovereign. It means the people. And I want to bring again this title of the book by Nadia Urbinati, I, the People. It means what she suggested is that leaders of the movement, they play important role because they embody the will of citizens. It means it's not a reality, it's their claim, right? That's why it is sort of they must exist almost permanent contact between the leaders of the populist movement in power and the people, the sovereign, right? Is the people. Is this possible? Well, so far in the countries which did not slide to the authoritarian regime, that's not done very well. But there are some examples outside the region, like let's say Venezuela, where it's precisely done. Maduro, let's say, what he does is keeping the direct contact through the media with the people, but with a tragic result from the operation of a constitutionalism in those countries. So I mean, similar, it seems to me, is in your neighbor, in the Philippines, right? Duterte is doing probably the same, or the very similar things. But coming back to making the point, or stressing the point, it is democracy, which was restricted by the too rigid interpretation of the constitution. That was the cause of the populist movement, and now is an attempt actually to sort of transform the operation of these institutions to fulfill the democratic promise. But that's only one, let's say, issue. The first, probably the most important issue. The second, also very important. I don't want to say that the most important, but important is the issue of identity. Well, Central Eastern Europe, is a corridor between the two superpowers. On the one hand was Germany, on the other hand is Russia. I mean, therefore, these small nations, starting from Baltic states and going up to the Balkans, let's say, they were always under the influence of one or another. And now, after the accession to the European Union in 2004, there was an imposition of some institutional solutions by European Union. Yeah, I mentioned this so-called Copenhagen criteria, but it went further, let's say. What I mean the further is that sort of the cultural war started in these countries. It means bringing in some new values from Western Europe. And in opinion of some people, is that was sort of the colonization when the outcome of that is a loss of identity. That's why the populist movement in the region, they try to defend their own identity. It means the cultural identity, religious identity. And, manifestation of that is, let's say, in the refusal to accept gay marriages, for instance, which is supported by the European Parliament and so on. So the identity is playing extremely important role, and it seems to me that from the sociological point of view, I could say that usually sociological scholars they look at the moment only, but we should probably consider seriously to look at the societies as in the process of the development. I claim that 30 years, the change of the generation after collapse of communism, that the new generation, they became more mature, politically more mature, and they see what constitutes their identities. But it's not only the question of the cultural war. It means the question of identity is a question of the communal or group rights, not individual rights. So from the point of view of the constitutionalism, it is manifested in the interpretation of the catalog of rights, not in the individualistic liberal way, but in the much more communitarian way. Right? And with again, interpretation done by the lawyers, by the judges, is in individualistic way. Why is that? Well, lawyers and judges, they are elite within society. When those who defend the identity, they are usually from the so-called lower classes, right? And the populists in power, they claim we express the true citizens, which means those citizens which are usually in the lower classes. And the third one is equality. Tell me, I speak now for about half an hour, so please give me 5 minutes and I will finish, right? Okay. Equality. So equality is access to resources. It means in what way? Social policies. That for 30 years there was an austerity measure, and now that it means these societies became relatively rich. The standard of living improved, but the distribution of this wealth was not equal. Therefore, what the populists in the region try to do is simply to transfer the change and put through social policies program to stream this access to resources to those who were disadvantaged for almost 30 years. It means we talk about plenty of different specific issues, like, for instance, the communication exclusion, that after liquidation of the state bus system or the railway system, then the plenty of people became simply excluded. They had no access to the communication, and they're telling them, oh, you should buy a car. That was not a solution, right? It's only as a sort of the simplistic maybe example. So what I want to stress, there are these different issues: democracy, identity, and economic equality, but understood not as an equality before law, but rather as a social equality, right? And what I, in the end, want to say, that I mentioned these three different types of constitutionalism, but we can't talk about the populism and constitutionalism without another concept, which is, it seems to me, necessary, mainly social constitutionalism. It is many years ago, the German Jewish leader of the social democracy, he wrote a very small brochure called the Idea of Constitution. And when he distinguished between the two constitutions, it means legal, the constitution as a legal document, and the real constitution, which are the social structure in the country. And he rightly claimed in this short brochure that the first one can function properly if it's not connected with a social constitution. So what I want to say that there is a growing, within the socio-legal scholars, there's a growing tendency towards a sociology of constitutionalism, which try to look at the processes and social ontology for the constitution. And in research or analysis of the populism and constitutionalism, it is impossible to simply skip that social constitutionalism. And what are the lessons actually for us, it seems to me, as a legal scholars, is that in approach to the relation between the constitutionalism and populism, it is necessary to do empirical research. It means not rely only on the juggling with the concepts as such, right? But it is necessary to observe the social processes, analyze the social institutions, and then connect and find out what are the sources and sources of the populism, and what are the outcome of the populists in power. But since they are in power now for the relatively short time, just 5 years or 10, 7, 8 years, so it's probably too early to say about the process of building of a populist constitutionalism. But what I want to see, that my sort of the wish and the normative attitude approach, it means I really think that populists will transfigure the operation of democracy, right? That it will give probably more power to the people, really, with the promise that what is democracy is the rule by the people and for the people and through the people. So that's my only wish, but at the same time, I have to say that that I can't see too many institutional innovations in the region. There is a lot of talk, but at the moment, this talk is not translated, let's say, to the changes in jurisprudence. It means in the interpretation of law, and probably more important, to the changes in the legal education. That legal education is one of the crucial elements, it seems to me, in any type of the innovations in the future. Thank you very much. I spoke, as I said, 7 minutes, and I will be happy to give answer to any questions as far as my knowledge will allow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Adam, for the incredible presentation. So before we enter the third agenda of our today's events, which is the question and answer session, if I can obtain several insights from the presentation that you have delivered in this webinar today, we have known that the populist movements that has existed since the 19th century has been a global phenomenon ever since. And as one of the examples that you have mentioned previously, that 30 years later, situation has turned differently, where even post-communistic countries have joined the European Union. And the populist movement is used as a political movement that adheres to the principle that sovereignty goes back to the people and goes back to the society and also for the people. And this has been an outcomings of liberal constitutional democracies. And if we try to correlate the idea of populism with constitution, is that constitution is legal art, as you said, where sources of human rights for citizens, where nowadays is taken out from the hands of citizens, where now it goes towards the lawyers and judges that can make cause disputes. However, you have previously mentioned that they share similarities in terms of limitation, institutional, in terms of political powers indeed. However, with the adherence of constitutionalism, you have recovered three main points that the society has been missing due to the rise of constitutionalism itself, which is first democracy that has been limited by two-digit interpretations, and hence that's why now there are institutions that are working its way to gain its democracies back to people. Then second is identity as one of the important factors of development for political maturity. So as equality and justice that is related to economical exclusions in the process where legal constitutionalism might be in the wrong hands at times. And this may also hide the greatest movements in populist region, and it is important for us to conduct empirical research, you might say, to analyze the social processes and the institutions to connect the sources of populism and the outcome they may empower. Is that correct, Prof. Adam?
So I guess why you invited me? You should say that instead of me, it will be enough.
I totally agree with your explanation. So thank you very much for the delivery of material. So now entering the third agenda of our event today, which is the question and answer session, which I would like to remind the audience again that if you would like to deliver any questions in regards of Prof. Adam's delivery of material, you can always write your questions on the comment section and I'll read it one by one. And since we are still waiting for the audience to deliver their question, I actually would like to ask to Prof. Adam in regards of the material that you have just delivered. So I've done several research in terms of populism, and I found out that populism is genus-based, where there is not a single form of populism, but rather a variety of different forms, each with profoundly different political consequences. And despite the current hegemony of authoritarian populism, a much different sort of populism is also possible, such as you have previously mentioned, the democratic populism, and also I've discovered this thing called the anti-establishment populism, which combines elements of liberal and democratic convictions. And when we examine the relationship between populism and constitutional democracy, populism should not be considered in isolation from its host ideology itself. And with some of the examples that I've received with the rise of populist political leaders in the West, for example, let's mention President Donald Trump or Marine Le Pen, the study of populism has become a central concern to the society as well. And the rising importance of populism in the West follows a period in which it has been a resurgence in other regions. However, the principles in the East part of the country itself are different. So I would like to ask, what do you think in regards of the importance of populism in the Eastern culture and the Eastern government as well, compared to the Western government and also the Western culture? Thank you.
Okay, so now can I try to
Yes,
to make an approach to your question? I don't look as first of all, according to my methodological standing, the answer will require enormous empirical research. And I haven't done such empirical research, therefore I want to not escape from your question, but we could simply lay down some sort of the condition. First of all, it seems to me populism is very often used as a label, which means a label against the political opponents, right? Why? Because it has a sort of the negative connotation. And so be careful. It means when you read, let's say, the newspapers and somebody, there is a label used populist, not necessarily it means there's a populist ideology there or the populist as phenomenon, but it's simply attempt to lower the profile of the political opponents. Only one examples which I knew, is so far is the Philippines. So you've got a populist movement in power in the Philippines. I don't have a detailed knowledge, but what I read is that the first of all, it means Duterte won power on the base of what? Of being close to the citizens, as a mayor of some town or province and so on. But then, surprisingly, when he took power, I didn't focus so much on the rhetoric used by Duterte, but on the use of the institutions, actually, right? It means, surprisingly, he outmaneuvered very quickly Constitutional Court. He outmaneuvered the Senate in the Philippines, which means he tried to, from within, using these institutions, bring in some, not a new modes of operation, modus operandi, but rather to impose some personal control. It means his own people in the places. How successful it will be, I think that is a short time perspective policy only, right? But trying to think again on your question, it seems to me that that inevitable in the plenty of countries, the populist movement will appear in the let's say, yeah, as you mentioned, east, using the geographical direction. I mean, in the Southeast Asian countries, for instance. Why? Two reasons. The first of all is globalization. It means if you take seriously the question of identity, then inevitably there will be a clash, right? Then the second is populists are also anti-establishment, anti-elitist movement. And which means, well, during the process of stability, sort of the petrification of the socio-political system is a creation of the elites, which have a tendency to reproduce themselves, right? As we know, in the globalization, there is that connection or influences between the political elites and economical elites. And from below, there will be a pressure coming to be co-opted to the elites, for instance, by the most talented, entrepreneurial people. If they found the block that they are not co-opted anymore, so then the political movement will start to remove these obstacles, right? And always is such that the populist political movements, they, in their rhetoric and policies, they are anti-establishment, but very quickly they generate their own elites, right? And which try to replace, it means find their own place in this new system. So I think that the populist movement is already probably in the process of creation in all of those countries. But empirically, reservation. I have to, let's say, do more studies, but I'm old, as you know. As when I'm old, I'm also slow. Therefore, I can't read too many stuff. So I focus only on the one region.
All right, thank you very much to Prof. Adam in regards of the insights that has been given to my first question. So I would like to remind again to the audience that if you would like to deliver any questions in regards of Prof. Adam's delivery of material, you can always write down your questions on the comment section and I will read it out one by one. And here we are still waiting for audience to deliver their question. So actually, I would like to ask my second question in regards to today's delivery of material, if you don't mind. So actually, according from my research as well about constitutional populism, one of the arguments that I've perceived in regards of this topic is written by Professor Ernesto Leclau, where he has argued that populists operate off of a political logic that seeks to aggregate a large number of social and political demands and resolve them through the popular elite dichotomy. So I would like to ask, what are your insights in regards to that argument in terms of, populism and the art of constitution itself? Thank you.
But could you please repeat that, because I didn't hear. There was some break in the connection. Argument.
All right, so one of the arguments that I have perceived in regards of this topic is also written by Professor Ernesto Laclau, where he has argued that the populists operate off of a political logic that seeks to aggregate a large number of social and political demands and resolve them through the popular elite dichotomy. So what are your insights in regards to that argument?
Well, the first, my according to my reading of Laclau, it is that basically each political movement we could call populist movement if we accept this logic, right? It means that what I remember, there are two types of logic, and the solution. One of the solution is that is a sort of the absorption of the process. The second is a difference principle. One is a difference, is a replacement as such. But that's a normal operation of any political system, it looks like. So therefore, it seems to me that if we follow this suggestion from Laclau, then each political system is a populist movement as such, which it seems to me is a too big claim. If we means analytically, if we talk about the populism, we have to find out the specificity. That's why I think that Laclau is more created the theory, but which could be useful if it's operationalized. But at the moment, what I try to operationalize, I find out that I can't simply receive the specificity, because everywhere will be is the same type of logic is in operation, right? Do you follow? So therefore, it seems to me I have to sort of dismiss the Laclau from the at the moment, at least. It means the theory of the populism as operating of the two type of logic, and it doesn't bring me any closer to the essence of this phenomenon at all.
All right, thank you very much in regards of your insights due to the second question that I've just delivered. So what I can obtain from your answers previously, that populism itself is, it's not only in one form, but is a variety of different forms. Like previously I've mentioned that there is such thing as democratic populism and also anti-establishment populism, where there will be no elite that is included in terms of the movement. So if we would like to ask you, how long has populism have been affiliated with the Republican Party? Does it existed since a long time ago, since the Republican Party has existed, or not? Because recently I've been trying to research about the existence and also the essence of Republican Party in terms of political movements, and I've heard some insights from several sources that populism has been affiliated to it. So what are your insights in regards to that, sir?
Well, that populism in the States and the relation with the Republican Party. Republican Party, American parties generally, it seems to me, they are not parties in the European sense at all. So it means that ideology of the parties is pretty open, right? It means they are sort of representing different type of interest as such. And as you know, the parties is based usually very small membership and restricted mainly to the apparatus which mobilize the people before election. But the phenomenon of Trump, as when he won the nomination from the Republican Party, was such that he was speaking in the language and expressed all those fears of average Americans who were afraid of losing their own position. It means sociologists claim that the victory in the election, not the last one, but the former one, was due to that the lower classes, workers, voted for Trump. It is not true. It means what the sociologists also found out, that actually the middle class voted, people from middle class, they voted for Trump. So now is a why. Why? Look, probably, it means my interpretation would be such that all those fears which were expressed by Trumps were the fears of the lower or middle and lower middle class. Fear of what? Of globalization, right? It means of outsourcing, losing economical position, not only losing also the political influence. And that's why it seems to me that this is wrong, actually, to make equation that Republican Party, with Trump at the moment, equals the mob which attacked the Congress. That the social sources of the Trump power were probably much deeper and broader, and they do exist, unless the policies, especially the social policies, will change in the US. And the changes are underway. It means this big package, which was adopted due to COVID, right, and the pandemics, and to help whom? Lower classes and lower middle classes. So but then is also a question of the identity, I mean, due to the migration, and not only, also the hegemonic, or losing the hegemonic position by the US. So that is really very complex phenomenon, but that's my thought.
Can I ask Prof. Adam Sekar?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, sure. But before Prof. Adam answers your questions, I would like to give the time and place for Prof. Adam to finish the insights in regards of the previous questions.
No.
Thank you, Prof. Adam.
Hello, Prof. Adam, you may continue.
No, I missed the reflection on that. Sorry, reflection on the Trump. I basically finished. There was a question I see here, that how by Yusti Rahawarin, right?
Yes, how populism transforms democracy, or what the success of populism means for democracy.
Okay, me, because the question was for everybody.
It's directed for you, sir.
Okay.
Sorry for the connections. Can I ask Professor Adam? It was a very great presentation and lecture, Prof. And learn a lot from your discussion with Sekar. Sekar also is very brilliant as an undergraduate student, and really proud of Sekar. I just follow your discussion and mention about Lack Law. And then when I read Lack Law, it seemed like Lack Law emphasized on the social movement, and normally in Europe by the worker community. And now populism is like shifting to kind of the right-wing groups, and just wondering, is that any effect of digitalization or social media? Because now people can speak up on social media, and easy to make a campaign, not as previously when people read and found information through the newspapers, and very limited production of information through the newspapers. Social media brings populism going to fragmented or many options of in the information. That the first one that I would like to ask Prof. Adam. And second, what about the position of the court? Is that populism and constitutional populisms give some effect to the independency of the court? So the court is not only settle the dispute, but also maintaining the power relations with the power holders. So it's wondering to have your opinion regarding to the position of the court, Professor Adam. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. And let me maybe give answers. You allow me to these questions, and then come back to the question which was written, on the chat. Okay. Thank you very much for the question. Is that media? Well, I could usually, as the academics do, I could say on the one hand and on another hand. It means on the one hand, it's true that the social media, they speed up the communication. They allow the communication between the similarly thinking people, but not only, also between the leaders, right? Leaders and closer contact with the followers as such. Followers, because there is a different type of the charismatic attitude, it seems to me. But on the other hand, it means generally from the society point of view, it means social media playing extremely sort of the damaging role from, by allowing the tribalization, the tribes, basically, those who believe in this leader, that leader, and another leader, they don't communicate between themselves. They only follow those who think in the similar way. So that's what media, but not only social media, even the sort of the traditional media, like newspapers nowadays, they are highly in the divided societies, based on disagreement. They are highly sort of the isolated. The people don't read other newspapers, only this type, and which means there's no public discussion. No, in public sphere, there's no more discussion about what constitutes public good for all citizens within the polity. That's rather sort of the imposition of the one view and claiming my view is better than another view. But it's true, that's to a high degree, Trump is an example, using Twitter permanently, right? It means that what the Twitter did, the Twitter allowed him to communicate with followers. Not communicated, he was sort of the passing on the messages to the followers to show them, look, I am like you, basically. I embody you all. So you are, as a title which I mentioned, I, the people, right? I am the people. So that's why I possess legitimacy. That's why I can do whatever I could do. And then the second question about the courts and populism. Fascinating question, really, it seems to me. So on the one hand, in the working democracy, right, let's use against example. Well, Trump appointed the person to the Supreme Court, which was usually followed the same pattern, which expressed the similar political worldview as he. But then the situation between, if we look seriously now about the impact of the populist movement in power on courts. So the first of all, it seems to me, is the attempt not so much, it seems to me, to destroy the autonomy of the courts, but to make judges accountable. What does that mean? That if I analyze the empirical data from Poland, for instance, what is going on is that after end of communism, there was a creation of the National Judiciary Council. And the National Judiciary Council, which represent the judges, all judges. It's about 10,000 judges in the Republic of Poland. So what's happened is that very quickly, this council became totally autonomous, right? not only judges were there, judges which accepted a new appointment of new judges, and the judges who promote themselves. So the closed system, basically without any type of accountability. So before and after the election, the populist movement claimed that our main attempt is to not to demolish the autonomy of judiciary, but to make judges accountable to the what? To the statutes, basically, right? It means that to work according to the will of sovereign expressed in law, which is the function of the judges. It means the what? The function of the judiciary is simply to apply law. But in practice, well, in practice could be actually in Poland nowadays. There's a huge division and the legal chaos. What does it mean? That is the government try to adopted some law which changed the operation of the National Council of Judiciary. Some part of judiciary claim is unconstitutional. I don't recognize them, the decision of the National Council of Judiciary. But there is a third element, European Union. It means, remember, European Union is not a federation yet. Is a sort of the strange type of polity, but it possesses a court and the system of law. Obligation of each member of the European Union is to stick to the values expressed by by the institutions and law of European Union. Therefore, there is a dialogue going on internally between within judiciary. Some judges are with the government, some against, and about the institutional changes. Then another is a dialogue between the change institutions, such as a new chamber in the Supreme Court, so-called disciplinary chamber, which is focused on the disciplining the judges if they breach the law, right, or the ethics, and the European Union institutions. In Hungary, to be honest with you, I don't know. I know that the Constitutional Court, which used to be totally independent and autonomous, is not anymore to the same degree autonomous and independent. But according to some of my Hungarian colleagues, it means they claim that on the level of the contact, what is important for the populace is the first contact with justice. Where is the first contact? Not in the Supreme Court or the appellate court, but in the regional first court. That situation is simply the autonomy of the judiciary exists. So there is a very dialectical type of relation when they try to change, right, make the judges accountable, but at the same time it means judiciary is a division inside. So I only give you some data, some information, but not so much, any radical answer that this or that. Coming back maybe to what comes to my mind with the role of the media. It happened that something like 5 years ago, I've been to Brazil, and I was in the down south in Brazil, where was this social movement sort of against the government. It was before Bolsonaro. And remember, it was quite interesting that those people who protested, there was a wave of huge protests, mass social movement. All of them, they mobilized themselves through the social media. It means Facebook mainly, right? But what was also fascinating, that this movement, when they were asked by the president to create leaders, they refused. They said they knew that creation of leadership, it means personal leadership, will destroy their movement. And you could claim it was a par excellence populist movement which wanted to bring change, but don't want to take power over. And partly they succeed. So that's let's go back to this question because time is pushing us. Question on the chat about the democracy, right? And Well, how populists transform democracy, or what the success of populism means for democracy. Well, what that means for democracy is a division between the division of opinions. Means usually you will find out that usually liberal scholars, they claim that that's a caricature of democracy, not anymore democracy. But it's not true. It's not anymore, let's say, liberal democracy, but we could say there's not one democracy. There's plenty of different forms of democracy. What does it mean? Probably in practical sense is a more use of a direct democracy. It means engagement of citizens in
I would like to inform to the audience to set the microphone to mute. Thank you.
that you know, it means that at least that more inclusion in the direct democracy. But is this good or bad? Well, I've got a divided opinion, not a clear one, because as you know, referenda, as let's say, means for direct democracy, are not easy tools. It means it's a tools which is very easy to manipulate. It means that referenda depends how the question and who formulate the referenda question. It means Charles de Gaulle used the referenda in a very clever way, but it was always manipulation with the citizens, it seems to me, right? So I don't have a clear answer. I could tell you that populists, generally, populists have a problem with all representative bodies, right? Because what they want to see is a direct connection between these leaders or leader and the people, the true people. And you could probably, as an example, is that legitimacy of the leader is not coming from even from election as such. It's coming from transcendence. Is that quite often they use that I got the insight to the truth, therefore I have to do. So it's extremely dangerous. Therefore, some people claim that that inevitable all populists in power will slide towards authoritarian regimes. But I don't think so, not necessarily. It seems to me that we could also expect that populists play the role of a sort of the repairer of democracy. It means when there is correction to the operation of democratic institutions. That's one question. And then Siti Farida asked the question, could populism be good for democracy, and should this populism not be considered separate from the original ideology? Well, I try to miss good or bad for democracy. That was my answer before. But separate from ideology, what I try to pass on here is that there is no one populist ideology really, because it depends from the context. It means from the cultural context, economical, and also the constitutional context. We could identify only some basic tenets, anti-establishment, but this anti-establishment manifests itself in the plenty of different ways, right? It means what does that mean? Nobody will question, let's say, the authority of some professionals, but they will question authority of such professionals, experts, which make decisions, policy decisions, instead of the representatives of the people. As you know, in the complex way now, we rely very heavily on the experts, which means science is telling us. But what if the people don't want to follow science? I don't think now about, let's say, anti-vaccination movement, right? But there is a plenty of areas of the, let's say, regional policies, right? When the politicians, in order to escape, say, from their responsibility, they claim, well, the experts tell us, or economical policies. And that's, it means they simply transfer plenty of areas of the policy decisions in the hands of the expert elites. And the populist movement is to a high degree against such transfer of decision-making from the representatives of the people to the hands of the expert elites. Well, my email, there was a question, can you give your email? Sure, why not? So my email, I will write here, okay, my email, all right? I hope that it was not very boring, not too, I know this is boring, but because I'm old and boring person, my daughter telling me this stuff, right? So,
Prof. Adam.
Yes.
Excuse me, Prof. Adam.
Yep.
Can I ask you, Prof. Adam?
Sure.
I wanna one question to you. How to control, how to democracy? There are obstacle legal system by Friedman, substansi, culture, and structure. How about to making law in action, some with law in books, in practice democracy in Indonesia? Thank you, Mr.
Because there was some not clear connections. Could you please repeat again the question? Because I didn't hear clearly.
I mean, how to democracy in Indonesia? There are obstacle legal system by Friedman, substansi, culture, and structure, and how to making law in action, some with law in book, in practice in democracy in Indonesia. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Look, I can't give you answer to what to do in Indonesia because I don't know too much about Indonesia. I follow with huge interest, you know, somewhere in the turn of 90s, the 21st century, that was this change, political change in Indonesia. And but my knowledge, and especially not only the book type of knowledge, but experience actually is none basically. But I could say that each democracy is struggling with the problem of identity. And solutions are different. It means how to preserve this identity, but the identity is not something which is stable. It's not a rock, right? Identity is also changing. Important is, you know, they could be two different types of change. They could be totally structural change, when the simply identity is lost and is appearance of the new type of identity. And there is a social change with preservation of the core of identity. Core, but around this core, there is a possibility for plenty of different changes. And then there is probably, it seems to me, another issue in the connected with the development of democracy. It means, as in Poland, that was never a democratic country. It means that the first time after 89. It means before 89 there was a communism, before was a war, before war was a dictatorial regime. There was a short period of the 5 years of democracy, but in society which was basically peasant society, illiterate. And now is a mass society, industrialized country, it's all different. But how to build democracy without experience of democracy? And that, it seems to me, is what I see, that in the majority of cases, the democracy is imposed on the very beginning, from above, by elites. In what way? By mimicking, by sort of the imitation of a solution from other countries. But after some times, there is a new type of elite, which says, well, we don't have to, imitate anything. We've got some sort of the reservoir to build up or modify these institutions and to build your version of democracy connected with your cultural identity. Only I knew that Poland is a homogeneous country, homogeneous in such sense that 98% of Poles, they are ethnic Poles. Indonesia is a 3,000 islands with a cultural diversity, as far as I know. And therefore, and then religious as well, diversity. So it means that, okay, Islam is a dominant, but there are some others as well, right? And that create huge problems. But the problems which nobody will solve except you. It means Indonesians will solve this problem for themselves. Now you could say, as I understand one of the part of your question, what is the role of law in this process? I could give you basically very general type of answer. If perception of law is as external to the people, there'll be none. The creation of the green sphere, going outside and ignoring law. If law will have some roots in culture and identity, then law could simply slowly change society, attitudes within society, and also sort of the safeguard democracy. I know that it's on the very abstract and general level, but sorry for that, but I don't feel entitled to teach, when I don't know about the society there. Yes. So I finished my answers.
All right, Prof. Adam, I see that the time has shown us that we have entered the last section of our agenda today, since there are no more questions in regards to the material delivered by you. So now we would like to enter the last agenda of today's event. So in today's webinar, ladies and gentlemen, we may conclude that in the correlation of populism as well as the implementation of constitutionalism, democracy has been limited by two-digit interpretations, and hence that's why now our institutions are working its way to gain its democracies back to the people. Then identity as one of the important factors of development for political maturity, so as equality and justice related to the economical exclusions in the process where legal constitutionalism is in the wrong hands, and they are able to hide the greatest movements in the populist region. And it is important for us to conduct empirical research to analyze the social processes and institutions to connect the sources of populism and the outcome they empower, and review the essence of it based from the explanation that has been delivered by Prof. Adam. Populism is used as a political movement that adheres to the principle that sovereignty goes back to the people, goes back to the society, and for the society. And lastly, we have entered the last agenda of today's webinar, which is closing remarks. And before we end today's webinar, I would like to give the time and place to Prof. Adam to give his closing remarks. Prof. Adam, may the time and place is yours. Thank you.
Well, the closing remarks, first of all, thank you very much for having me there. And then I am really impressed by the moderator. I mean, that's a real talent, right? And probably you will make a big career, right? And look, my closing remarks would be, because you are, as I understand, majority of you are lawyers and academic lawyers. So one of my intellectual hobby is a legal education. And I mentioned before that legal education play important role. And but what I also knew is that in the majority of countries, almost in all countries, the teaching of law is reduced to the teaching of legal rules, legal text. And it shouldn't be like this, right? It means that law is more than legal text only. law are values, law are behavior of people, law are attitudes as well. Therefore, what I wanted to pass on as a message is that think seriously about what sort of changes you could bring to the legal education in your area in order to what? To increase democracy, for instance, right? What we discussed today. And it's a huge, job for lawyers in this area. So thank you very much. It was an honor to be invited here.
It was an honor for us to have you here in today's webinar, Prof. Adam. So thank you very much, Prof. Adam, for your gracious closing remarks. And Heylaw and I, as moderator, would like to thank Prof. Adam for sparing his time to provide us with very insightful study in regards to constitutional populism. So as we would like to also thank Fakultas Hukum Universitas Hazairin Bengkulu and all the campus partners that has helped us in terms of giving realization in today's webinar. And we hope by performing this webinar may give additional insights, benefit, and interest to the audience. I would like to also apologize in advance if there are mistakes in my words or actions, and we are wishing you all a great day. Thank you and see you on our next webinar series. And for the audience, do not forget to also fill in the absence list that has the link provided by the Heylaw members as well. So thank you, good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Have a nice rest of the day.
Have a nice
more enjoyable. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Prof. Adam.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Professor. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.